The fluorescent lights flickered ominously in the sterile hallways of St. Mercy Hospital, casting an eerie glow on the pale faces of patients and visitors alike. Amidst the chaos of beeping monitors and hushed whispers, Nurse Megan glided through the corridors with an otherworldly grace. Her long, raven-black hair cascaded down her back, contrasting sharply with her pristine white uniform. Her emerald eyes sparkled with kindness, masking the dark secret that lurked beneath her gentle exterior. Megan's delicate hands expertly adjusted IVs and fluffed pillows, her touch bringing comfort to those teetering on the brink of death. Little did they know that her very presence was hastening their demise. As she made her rounds, the air grew thick with the stench of decay, a scent only she could detect. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Johnson?" Megan asked, her voice as sweet as honey. The elderly man in room 301 managed a weak smile. "Better now that you're here, Angel," he rasped. Megan's heart clenched. If only he knew the truth. She watched in horror as the skin around his eyes began to sag, his cheeks hollowing out before her very eyes. She blinked, and the illusion vanished. But she knew it was no illusion at all. As I left Mr. Johnson's room, my mind raced with conflicting emotions. How could my desire to help be causing so much harm? The weight of my cursed lineage pressed down upon me, threatening to crush my spirit entirely. The hospital buzzed with activity, but to Megan, it felt like a tomb. She passed by room after room, each one housing a soul on the verge of crossing over. In room 405, a young mother lay comatose, her body ravaged by cancer. Megan's fingers brushed against the woman's arm, and she watched in mute horror as dark veins spread beneath her skin like spiderwebs. "Mommy, please wake up," a small voice pleaded from the corner. Megan turned to see a little girl, no more than 6 years old, clutching a tattered teddy bear. The child's eyes were red-rimmed from crying, her cheeks hollow from weeks of worry and poor nutrition. "Your mommy's very sick, sweetheart," Megan said, kneeling beside the girl. "But I promise I'll do everything I can to help her." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. She knew that her promise was empty, that her very presence was hastening the woman's death. As she hugged the child, Megan could almost feel the life force draining from the small body. The night shift dragged on, each minute an eternity of suffering. Megan's footsteps echoed in the empty corridors as she made her way to the nurse's station. The flickering overhead lights cast grotesque shadows on the walls, morphing and twisting into macabre shapes that seemed to mock her. "Hey, Megan," called out her colleague, Nurse Rita. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." If only she knew how close to the truth she was. "I'm fine," Megan lied, forcing a smile. "Just a long night." Rita's concerned expression morphed into one of horror. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened in a silent scream. Megan watched as Rita's skin began to sag, her eyes sinking into their sockets. In a matter of seconds, Rita looked as though she had aged decades. "Rita?" Megan reached out, but her hand passed through her colleague as if she were made of smoke. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. This can't be happening. I'm losing my mind. But deep down, I knew the truth. My father's legacy was consuming me, turning my healing touch into a harbinger of death. As dawn approached, Megan found herself drawn to room 217. Inside lay Sarah, a young woman battling a rare blood disorder. Sarah had been Megan's patient for months, her vibrant spirit and unwavering optimism touching something deep within Megan's tortured soul. "Hey there, sunshine," Sarah greeted her weakly. "Come to check on your favorite patient?" Megan's throat tightened as she took in Sarah's appearance. Her once lustrous blonde hair had thinned to wispy strands, and her skin was so pale it was almost translucent. Dark circles ringed her sunken eyes, giving her the appearance of a living corpse. "How are you feeling?" Megan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's laugh turned into a hacking cough. Like death warmed over, she joked, unaware of the irony in her words. As Megan checked Sarah's vitals, she noticed the familiar signs of accelerated decay. Sarah's fingernails were turning black, and her teeth seemed to be rotting in her mouth. The stench of putrefaction filled the air, making Megan's stomach churn. "Megan," Sarah said, her voice suddenly serious. "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Megan replied, fighting back tears. If I don't make it, I want you to live your life to the fullest. Don't let my death hold you back." The words hit Megan like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her vision blurring as memories of her own tragic past flooded her mind. Years ago, Megan had been a normal teenager, unaware of her true nature. Her mother had shielded her from the truth of her parentage, but on her 18th birthday, everything changed. The Grim Reaper himself had appeared, his skeletal form looming over her bed. "My daughter," he had rasped, his voice like nails on a chalkboard. "It is time for you to embrace your destiny." Megan had screamed, but no sound escaped her lips. She watched in horror as her mother burst into the room, only to crumble to dust before her eyes. "Your first harvest," the Reaper had said, his empty eye sockets gleaming with malevolent glee. The memory faded, leaving Megan trembling at Sarah's bedside. She looked down at her hands, half expecting to see them transformed into bony claws. "Megan?" Sarah's weak voice snapped her back to reality. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Megan lied, forcing a smile. "Just lost in thought." As the night wore on, Megan found herself torn between her duty as a nurse and the growing realization of her true nature. Every act of kindness, every comforting touch, seemed to bring her patients closer to death's door. In the pediatric ward, little Timmy's leukemia suddenly took a turn for the worse after Megan read him a bedtime story. His small body convulsed violently, blood pouring from his eyes and ears as his parents watched in helpless horror. On the surgical floor, Mr. Patel's routine appendectomy became a nightmare of necrotic flesh and pus-filled abscesses. The surgeons worked frantically to save him, unaware that death itself stood among them in the form of a kind-hearted nurse. With each passing hour, the hospital descended further into chaos. Alarms blared incessantly as patients coded left and right. The air grew thick with the stench of decay and the metallic tang of blood. Megan's colleagues rushed about in a panic, their faces masks of confusion and terror. How could so many things go wrong at once? What unseen force was tearing through their patients like a scythe through wheat? As dawn approached, Megan found herself once again at Sarah's bedside. The young woman's condition had deteriorated rapidly, her body a roadmap of bruises and lesions. "Megan," Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "What's happening to me?" I couldn't bear to tell her the truth, that my very presence was killing her, that my attempts to comfort and heal were only hastening her demise. Instead, I took her hand in mine, feeling the fragile bones beneath paper-thin skin. "It's okay, Sarah," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm here with you." As the words left my lips, I felt a surge of power coursing through my veins. The air around us grew cold, and shadows seemed to coalesce at the edges of the room. "Daughter," a familiar, chilling voice rasped, "it is time." I turned to see my father, the Grim Reaper himself, materializing from the darkness. His skeletal form loomed over us, scythe gleaming wickedly in the dim light. "No," I pleaded, clutching Sarah's hand tighter. "I won't let you take her." The Reaper's empty eye sockets bored into me. "You have no choice, child. This is who you are. This is what you were born to do." As if to emphasize his point, Sarah's body began to convulse violently. Blood poured from her eyes, nose, and mouth, staining the white sheets crimson. Her skin blackened and peeled away in large chunks, revealing the decaying flesh beneath. Make it stop, Sarah screamed, her voice distorted by pain and terror. Megan, please, make it stop. I stood frozen, torn between my desire to help and the horrifying reality of my nature. With each passing second, Sarah's suffering intensified, the room filled with the sickening sound of cracking bones and tearing flesh. End it, my father commanded. Show mercy, daughter. It is the kindest thing you can do. With trembling hands, I reached out and placed my palm on Sarah's forehead. I felt the life force draining from her, flowing into me like a river of molten fire. Sarah's eyes locked onto mine, filled with a mixture of fear, confusion, and gratitude. As the last spark of life left her body, a sense of profound power washed over me. The shadows in the room seemed to bow in my presence, acknowledging their new mistress. "Well done," my father said, his bony hand resting on my shoulder. "You have embraced your true nature at last." I turned to face him, my eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light. "No," I said, my voice resonating with newfound authority. "I haven't embraced it. I've transcended it." With a wave of my hand, I banished the Grim Reaper back to the shadows from whence he came. The power coursing through me was intoxicating, terrifying, and liberating all at once. As the first rays of dawn crept through the hospital windows, I stood amidst the carnage I had unwittingly wrought. Bodies lay strewn about, their faces frozen in expressions of agony and terror. The air was thick with the stench of death and decay. But I felt no remorse, no guilt, only a cold, calculated understanding of my place in the grand scheme of things. I was no longer just the Grim Reaper's daughter. I had become something more, something that straddled the line between life and death, between mercy and cruelty. As I walked out of St. Mercy Hospital, leaving behind a trail of destruction and unanswered questions, I couldn't help but smile. The world thought it knew the face of death, a skeletal figure in a black robe, scythe in hand. But now, death wore the face of a kind nurse, with gentle hands and a comforting smile. And as I disappeared into the early morning mist, I knew that my journey was just beginning. For in a world of suffering and pain, there would always be a need for the tender mercies of death. And I, Megan, daughter of the Grim Reaper and mistress of mortality, would be there to answer the call. The hospital faded into the distance behind me, its walls now a tomb for the countless souls I had ushered into the beyond. But ahead lay an entire world, filled with billions of beating hearts, each one a ticking clock counting down to its final moment. And I would be there, with my gentle touch and soothing words, to guide them into the eternal night. After all, kindness can be deadly, and death can be the greatest kindness of all.